The Four Maidens, beings of myth and legend representative of the four seasons. They began their existence as a force for good, but that hasn't always been the case. The magical powers possessed by the maidens must continue to exist, and so those powers persist by passing to a new young woman each time the maiden who last possessed them passes on. Those powers then jump to the person who is in that maiden's mind the last, but sometimes the last person on your mind before you die is the one who killed you. It is in that way that the great power of these maidens has come into the possession of evil people multiple times throughout history. A group has arisen to protect the maidens and prevent this from happening whenever possible. A group led by Professor Ozpin, the head of Beacon Academy. So when one of these maidens, one of the good ones, is struck down and part of her powers are stolen, leaving her in a state where she has no choice if she dies but to pass the rest of her power onto the one who hurt her, Ozpin and his allies enact a plan to pass the rest of her power onto a worthy successor. They plan to use this by transferring her aura, the physical manifestation of her soul, into another person. But they worry and therefore warn that person that something of the maiden might come with it, that that person might be changed forever by the process. She is urged to think on her decision, and in the time it takes for her to decide, it becomes too late. Disaster strikes, and Ozpin is forced to engage in a battle that he can't win. He's killed, only for his consciousness to awaken sometime later in the mind of a boy named Oscar. Ozpin journeys to reunite with one of his old allies and recover his weapon so that he might re-enter the fight against evil. But I don't think this is the first time that this has happened. In fact, I think Ozpin might be as old as the maidens themselves. I have a couple of reasons for thinking this. Now, granted, RWBY is the kind of show where it introduces its lore in stages. We know that Ozpin and his allies had a machine that could transfer someone's aura from their body into the body of another person, but we know very little about where it came from aside from the fact that it uses Atlas technology, etc., etc. Ozpin has this whole clock motif going on between his weapon and his office, but we don't actually know what his powers are, what his semblance is. We see very briefly that he can move his body inhumanly fast, and then we see him form some sort of sigil on the ground followed by a barrier, but these could be a lesser power of his semblance and a function of his weapon itself, respectively. We know that giving Pyrrha the rest of Amber's aura, of Amber's soul, in order to transfer the rest of Amber's powers to her is not the same process that those powers usually use to transfer from person to person. There is no mention of each new maiden retaining anything of the past maiden's personality, but in this instance, that was a real fear for Ozpin and his allies. This means that we don't know how it is that the powers of the maidens are transferred in the first place. This means that his aura transfer machine is likely designed to emulate some other process. Couple that with the fact that Oz is the one in possession of this machine, Oz and Beacon Academy itself, rather than General Ironwood and Atlas Academy, and we can reason that Oz's presence was necessary in the development of the machine itself. I think that it is very possible that the aura transfer machine was designed to emulate Ozpin's semblance. That Ozpin has been able to persist, possibly for as long as the maidens themselves, protecting the maidens, by transferring his consciousness into the mind of a suitable host upon his death, over and over again. At which point he trains that host, possibly with the goal of eventually merging with the mind that already exists there and becoming a new, full version of himself. He doesn't seem to have any control over where he ends up, or else he probably would have picked somebody who had training in a similar fighting style to his own rather than a simple farm boy who doesn't seem to be able to fight at all. But even though we haven't seen any indication that Oz is able to control Oscar, the fact that he was able to convince Oscar to leave his home so quickly and easily does suggest that he exerts some sort of influence over his new host each time he assumes one. If this is the case, then it explains why they were worried that the aura transfer machine would take something of Amber and put it into Pyrrha, as it is built to emulate Oz's semblance, which does the same. This would mean that it isn't just Oz's mind that occupies Oscar now, but his aura and his semblance as well. It even fits with Ozpin's time motif. If you look at it from the perspective of each time he dies, he becomes young again, turning back the clock. As I said, RWBY is the kind of show that reveals its lore in stages, and there isn't a whole lot of predictability in terms of its lore, as it is a universe which encompasses various forms of magic, so predicting where the show is going accurately is difficult. That said, I have literally no way of knowing if this is true, but I feel like what little evidence we have does fit. If you want to take things a step further, you can even assume that Ozpin might even be the same wizard from the story of the maidens who gave them their powers in the first place. It would certainly explain why he feels so responsible for them now. But like I said, I really don't know. This is mostly speculation, but the detail that convinced me that this could be right was the very last scene of RWBY Volume 4, where Oscar, guided by Ozpin's voice inside his head, reaches his destination and reunites with Crow Bronwyn. Oz tells Oscar to ask Crow for his weapon back, Oz making the assumption that Crow will immediately know what he's talking about. And Crow does. He gives Oscar Ozpin's cane, and even calls Oscar Oz. This tells me that Crow has either seen Oz respawn, for lack of a better term, into a new body, or Oz has told him about this power at some point in the past. I mean, I know it was the final scene of the volume and it was meant to hook audiences for upcoming episodes, but I can't shake the feeling that Crow's casual acceptance that this is the new Ozpin was included in that scene for a reason. I don't know, what do you guys think of this theory? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22 and I will talk to you guys later. And there it is, you guys have been asking for it. Finally, I have released my second RWBY theory, this time about the character from the hero's side at least, that we might know the least about, Ozpin himself. I've actually been thinking a lot of this since back when I watched Volume 3, but that final scene with Crow really did convince me that this might be true. True or not though, it was a lot of fun coming up with this. If you enjoyed the video and you enjoy my channel overall and you'd like to help it to grow, then I'd like to remind you that I do have a Patreon, link in the description down below. I have a few interesting reward tiers, but if you don't see any rewards that you feel like fit for you, feel free to contact me and we'll work something out. I really am thankful for everyone who has pledged so far, and I know there are a couple of you that I need to get in touch with to determine exactly which rewards you'd prefer. I will be doing so soon. All of that said though, guys, thank you for watching.